Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Technology's off to a hot start today. Not wanting to work, flipping in and out of the intro, but hopefully you guys can hear us. Hopefully Nick can hear me. Think he can. There we go. Cool. Well, this is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. We give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we hope you prevail for Week 15, first round of your fantasy playoffs, and the rest of the 2023 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me, as always, is Nick Cap. And Nick, it's playoff time. You've had a very, very successful fantasy season, probably the best in your 10, 12, whatever the number is, years of playing fantasy. So congratulations. Your job's not done, so I'm not going to give you too many congratulations. But speak to it, man. I think you're having the kind of fantasy year that I had, 2 years ago, where I wiped the floor with 3 leagues in my pick'em pool. So talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like Nick said, job ain't finished. Job's not over yet, but you want to be in as good of a position as you can be going into Week 15 to start your playoffs. So I'm in 4 leagues that actually matter and that I care about, 5 in total. In all 4 of them, I am in the playoffs, no problem. Buying one, and we'll be playing in the first round in the other 3. Points wise, technically I have the higher projection in 2 of them, but projections mean absolutely nothing in fantasy football. And yeah, I mean, 2 of them I'm number 1 in points in. 1 of them I'm middle of the pack. I don't expect myself to win the championship in that one, but I got a very good matchup. The person in the playoffs with the least points scored. And the other league, I probably have the best roster in the league. Couple unfortunate games, couple injuries, but so long as Justin Jefferson's healthy, should have a very good postseason. So we'll keep you posted on week to week. If you see me very disappointed on an intro on a Tuesday, that most likely means that Monday and Sunday, and I guess Saturday, because we get Saturday football now, did not go to plan.
Well, here's the other thing. Nothing's guaranteed, and you could win that league that you're middle of the pack in, and you could lose the other ones. Like you just don't know. Fantasy playoffs. Anything can kind of happen. So you don't know until you get in there. Any seed can win. And we've seen in our league, a couple 6 seeds have won it before. Yours truly was bounced by a 6 seed when I had I call it the best fantasy team ever assembled in our league, at least. I'm still impressed at that one. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. So we're going into the playoffs. I'm in some playoffs as well. I got some unlucky bounces, unfortunately, so not in as many playoffs as I'd like to be, but I have a chance to win some money as well. So excited about that. So we're here to get you ready for your playoffs. We're here to talk about the waiver wire. We're here to answer your questions, most importantly. So if you are driving home from work, or maybe you're off of work or off of class or whatever, jump in that chat on YouTube or Facebook, and you can ask us questions. We'll do that throughout the entirety of this hour. Do have a hard out at 6:30, but that's okay. We have an hour to help you guys out with fantasy football. So we're going to go through the waiver wire for Week 15, slim pickings as expected. But then we're going to go into our Week 14 recap. A lot of injuries to talk about, unfortunately. Some factors that are going to affect your fantasy football playoffs. So without further ado, let's kind of do this. So, Caldwell's already in the chat. We appreciate you. Some plugs to get out of the way first. We do this show every single Tuesday, normally about 8:30 p.m. We're doing a little bit early today. It just kind of worked out better for our schedules. Holidays are coming up, so things can kind of flip. But you will have a show from us every Tuesday with the waiver wire and with the recap. It will be live. We'll let you guys know on our social media channels. That live show is going to be on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. YouTube and Facebook is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Twitter is PrimeTimeFFPod. If you're watching live, make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon on YouTube so you get notifications every single time we do go live. We also do a live show Sunday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern time, to get you ready for that upcoming day of football, to help you set your lineups, answer your fantasy questions. Me and Nick both have a lot of fun doing that show with you guys. Again, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Our shows also go on all of our audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor if you like to listen in podcast form. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. Really would appreciate that from you guys. Follow us and interact with us on social media, PrimeTimeFFPod, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. It's Primetime Fantasy Podcast. You know who Caldwell already says, happy Tuesday, fellas. Good call on DeVito. Secured the bye in my 12-man league. You know what? We were shooting darts at a board, but I'm happy we were happy we hit a bullseye on that one. DeVito had a good game last night. He did. He may have to be my – yeah. I don't know where that comes from. I saw that on Twitter, and I don't get it.
Did you see his agent? Did you see his father? I mean, I saw the agent. He's a New Jersey Italian, and for us New York, New Jersey people, he represents proud. I hate the Giants organization personally. Not a fan. Never have been. The Giants. Tommy Cutlets might be my favorite up and coming quarterback in the league.
Imagine we were playing like Madden. Remember we used to play Madden and we'd play with the backup quarterbacks. We do like our 3 randoms and have to use a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
It's fun with that. All right, guys, let's get into our show because we can't ramble like we normally do. We have a waiver wire for week 15. Very slim pickings on the waiver wire, but let's talk about it. Quarterback's going to be a bit important this week. Yours truly has to go to the waiver wire for quarterback due to Justin Herbert going out. Now, here's the thing. The league that I lost Herbert in, I do have a bye. My team is going to limp into the second round. I lost Herbert, lost Mark Andrews, Tony Pollard's a bum. So I'm limping into the second round, but let's see who we can kind of play with here. Jake Browning's owned in 28.8% of leagues. For the sake of other people on their waiver wires, they might need a player this week. So let's look at the matchups for this week. So Jake Browning is going to be facing the Vikings. Now, according to Fantasy Pros, his strength of schedule for the playoffs is a 1-star out of 5. I'm not sure who else he has, but the Vikings seems like a favorable matchup to me. Although their defense did look good on Sunday. Gardner Minshew, owned in 22% of leagues, he'll be facing the Steelers defense. Joe Flacco, Cool Joe, coming out of retirement, I guess, maybe technically, will be facing the Bears defense. Derek Carr for the Saints will be facing, why can I not find the Saints game on my ESPN?
The Giants.
The Giants. Okay, so let's go with those guys. I mean, who are maybe your top 3? Who do you like for this week and rest of playoffs?
Jake Browning's clearly the one to me. He's stepped right into Burrow's role. Back-to-back fantasy performances over 24 points. That's exactly what you want to see out of your fantasy quarterback. I'd totally ride Jake Browning for the rest. Maybe not the rest of the year because they do have, I believe, Pittsburgh and Kansas City.
You're correct. So they are hosting the Vikings at Pittsburgh at the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are going to have to go on a burner at some point.
For sure. They're going to heat up. I mean, I think Kansas City will probably win out the rest of the year. Their schedule's not too tough. I'd go Jake Browning, no questions asked. Especially if you only need the 1 week rental. He's definitely one of those go-to guys, I think. If one of your upper guys has a tough matchup, he's a good pivot. And typically the person who pivots does best in fantasy. I have Tua as my quarterback in a league. I'm going to pivot to Jake Browning. This week.
What about Gardner Minshew? Rest of playoffs. We have hosting the Steelers, at the Falcons, and hosting the Raiders.
I like Minshew. I would probably lean a little bit more on Flacco. I did like what I saw. That offense has been clicking and rolling. The running game has not been fantastic. So you've seen a lot more check down screen passes from Flacco, yards after catch. I believe he had 300 yards in the air or close to it. So he had a very good game to begin with. And I think that he's going to ride the hot hand going to host Chicago this week.
So I like him for Chicago, and then he has the Texans, but then he's hosting your Jets.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you don't want to
your Jets defense is still pretty good. I'm not sure how they're going to play in week 16 or 17 if you're out of the playoffs, but if you're picking up Flacco for these 2 weeks, you probably need to look into a backup plan for week 17 if you are planning ahead.
Agreed.
And the last guy I'll look at here is Derek Carr. Derek Carr's schedule, hosting the Giants, at the Rams, and at the Bucs. That's not a super easy schedule either. So how about we rank them for this week only, and then we'll rank them if you're in my position and you have like Herbert and the bye, and now you're picking up somebody, for the rest of the playoffs. So why don't you go first, and why don't we rank them just for this week only if you need a 1 week rental like you have Tua and you just don't want to play Tua.
I'd go Browning 1, Flacco 2, and then I guess Derek Carr out of the field as 3. I like Minshew, but I don't like him against Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Not a simple matchup.
Okay. I don't like the Pittsburgh matchup either. I think I would agree with you on Browning, although again, we're shooting darts at the board here as well. I think I would agree on Browning. I think then I'd go to Derek Carr, then I'd go to Flacco, and then I'd go Minshew 4. But again, we're throwing darts at the board. And how about rest of the playoffs? What are you looking at?
Rest of the playoffs, I'm still going to go probably similar order. Jake Browning. I don't think that there's any of these quarterbacks that I would want to trust for a 3-week stretch. So if you're going to pick up one, I'd rather the one with the best matchup this week and kind of figure it out after that. You never know who's going to get hurt, who's going to go down. I don't know what percent Geno's rostered in, but they have one of the easier schedules rest of the way. If Drew
got to be over 40%. I don't think you'll find Geno on your waiver wire. Be shocked.
So if it is Drew Lock this week hosting the Eagles' horrendous secondary, I do like that matchup. After that, I mean, Tommy DeVito is someone you could play around with. He did have a very solid game, but he has not been the end-all be-all for your fantasy team. He's really just been more fun for football.
I think in my situation, somebody that has to replace Justin Herbert and is going into the second round, I think I'm actually going to put Gardner Minshew first. A couple reasons. Match against the Falcons, that's an easier matchup, and so is a matchup against the Raiders. And here's the other thing, and I love to say this. I want players that are playing for something. And the Colts are playing for a playoff spot, not just a playoff spot, but for the division. So the Colts have a very strong incentive to win out. I think their Week 17 game is going to matter. So looking at these guys, I think the Bengals won't be in play. The Browns will be in play, and the Saints will be in play. So that kind of goes against my argument. But I think Minshew's been the most stable out of all of them. Derek Carr's he's like the fish in SpongeBob that has all the broken bones. So,
I don't want Derek Carr.
Derek Carr's on the best offense out of them, but he all his bones are broken.
Jake Browning's on the best offense out of any of them, for sure.
Probably,
I think, and I don't want to cut you off, but Gardner Minshew has not scored over 20 points since Week 7. For fantasy,
I feel like
playoffs,
all these guys haven't. I feel like I'm just looking for like a 15-point performance. I think that's what
if you're looking for 15, Minshew can get you that, but you need a guy that's going to go win you a week, and a guy that'll win you a week is going to be more of the Jake Browning, which is why I'd still put him above Minshew. Minshew's rushing upside will offer a safer floor. But Jake Browning's upside, he's already proved in this offense. This is back-to-back weeks over 25 fantasy.
You'd be okay playing him against Pittsburgh or even Kansas City in your championship. Minshew against the Raiders.
Kansas City's where it becomes a question. Pittsburgh's secondary has been a lot more susceptible. I just don't like the division matchup. That's typically where you want to pivot.
Right. So again, that's why I would put Minshew at 1. I think I'd have Browning at 4 if I'm playing rest of the season. And I'm in my situation where I have a bye and I need to get rid of Herbert. I like Minshew rest of the season more. And then I might put Derek Carr at 2. I'm not going to play Flacco against the Jets. I'm looking for a guy who could play for 2 weeks, unless I'm picking up 2 quarterbacks, which I could do. So that's how I would do it, at least. We got some questions in the chat. Let's always prioritize the questions. Sally says, did you see DeVito's family tailgate spread? I did. A lot of jokes on Twitter.
Fantastic.
Caldwell had said to add Geno and DeVito to these ranks. So I didn't put Geno in these ranks or DeVito because they're just not. DeVito's probably owned in less than like 40-50% of leagues, but Geno's got to be over.
Probably owned in less than 5% of leagues, honestly.
Who, Geno or DeVito?
DeVito
for sure. Geno, if Geno's on your waiver wire, I'd pick him up over any of these guys that we just mentioned.
I would still go over him, but I agree.
Go Browning over Geno. Wow. You have a lot of trust.
Is so loaded.
You have a lot of trust in that Bengals offense. That's really funny.
I'm looking at Walmart Joe Burrow, and he's playing phenomenal.
Okay. From Lex Plant Some Trees, drop Roshan, Khalil Herbert, or both for any of Chai Chandler, Zamir, or Mingo. I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I don't want any player you just even listed.
I would consider dropping Roshan for Zamir White. If Josh Jacobs misses this week, and the report was he wouldn't have practiced if they had one today,
I'll toy with that
Roshan's
one.
not going to play, period, on your lineup rest
For
of the year.
sure. I think I'd want to keep Khalil. I think I'd want to keep Khalil Herbert, but I don't love any. I
that's
don't
fine.
love any name that I'm seeing here.
Zamir White and the Vegas would be playing on Thursday. So against the Chargers. So if you're going to talk about a team that's not,
Oh, I forgot they were
no
Thursday.
Justin Herbert. It's going to be a susceptible defense. Like the Chargers are a team you could take very much advantage of. And if Josh Jacobs is hurt and not playing, Zamir White's a must start in week 1 of your playoffs. So
yeah,
I think he's worth the add over Roshan.
Okay, that's fair.
Maybe even
I'll agree
over
with you on
Herbert.
that. I'll agree with you on that. From Joe, do you think Mahomes is going to rebound following this rough stretch? I mean, yeah, the Chiefs are going to win out. I don't know from a fantasy perspective what his kind of numbers are going to be, but like you're not benching Mahomes. Like he'll still put up a good number for you.
I don't think he's going to be the league winner, week winner. He has not been great for fantasy. Just like I said, Minshew hasn't scored over 20 points since week 7.
Sure.
Mahomes only has 1 game over 20. I think Minshew's averaging more points per game since week 7 than Mahomes. But for a guy that talented, that relies on his legs a lot, he has not found a rushing touchdown all season. That's an outlier for him. I'm sure he'll pick up a couple down the stretch. And his touchdown numbers are always going to be good. He's got He's got New England this week, and I know New England just played on the Thursday night game, so they got some rest, which is a little concerning. But
I don't care. This is such a Chiefs beatdown week.
Yeah, I mean,
they're angry. They're angry. The Chiefs are going to turn into the Chiefs.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I don't know what kind of rebound we're going to see per se from Mahomes himself. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. He's just not going to be a top 3 quarterback, which is why I didn't want to draft him as a top 3 quarterback.
Exactly.
He doesn't have the rushing upside. He never. I mean, he's mobile, but he's not a rushing quarterback. So that's why I wasn't justifying drafting him over Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. They were all right there.
I gotcha.
Mahomes is there because of a knee. I mean, look at your right here, Nick, on Fantasy Pros. Number 1, Josh Allen, a guy you were very high on and drafted high. And then Jalen Hurts is 20 points behind. They're both right there. That's exactly what we expected, me and you, based on our drafts before the season.
Yep.
And Lamar is number 4. Like I was not targeted. I don't think you were targeted. Maybe you were targeting Mahomes. I was not targeting Mahomes. I was not targeting Mahomes. I was not targeting Trevor. The guys that I was targeting were Hurts, Justin Herbert, who's ranked 10th at the moment. Burrow, who would have been a top 10 quarterback barring the injury. So, yeah, long-winded answer to the question. Like he'll be fine, but Nick, I'll let you take this question from Brandon Mellon. Tua or Purdy this week?
I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's Purdy. Since week 7, we talked about Minshew and Mahomes, only 1 game over 20 points in that stretch. Since week 7, Purdy has 1 game under 20 points in that stretch. He's currently the QB5 on the year on the most loaded offense in all of football. Purely alone against Arizona, he's going to absolutely beat them down. I expect to see Sam Darnold in there by the 4th quarter, which might be my only apprehension, but Tua's going up against the best defense in football in the New York Jets, at least the best team against the wide receiver position, and that's where Tua really heavily relies. Raheem Mostert has the most rushing touchdowns this year. They're going to rely on him on the ground again earlier this year, and he'll probably keep up some crazy pace like that. Last time Tua played the Jets as well, I believe he only had 8 fantasy points. So the matchup is just not there for Tua this week. And Purdy's been a top 5 guy for the majority of the season. He's been keeping up the pace. He's only averaging 2 less points per game than Dak Prescott, who's the MVP favorite. So I'm happy to ride Purdy. And I think he's going to be someone that Nick and I talk a lot about next year as where you draft him and what his ADP should be.
I'm happy you mentioned the word MVP, and that's why I don't think they pull Brock Purdy from this game. They're going to have to be up 40 points to pull Brock Purdy from this game. I think Shanahan and the Niners are going to keep Purdy out there for as long as they want to the rest of the season. I think they want to make a push for him to be the MVP, even though I don't think he should be the MVP. But I echo everything Nick said. Easy answer for me. I think Brock Purdy's your starter for the rest of the season. If you have him on a fantasy team. I mean, how many quarterbacks would you start over Brock Purdy right now? You'd start your obvious Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Lamar. Purdy's number 5. So like Purdy or Mahomes, that's where the question really gets interesting. We don't have to debate it, but I think that's where things get interesting. I would put Purdy over Howell, Stroud, Love, Lawrence, Tua, Goff, Russell Wilson. I'm just going down the list. Like Purdy's your top 5 quarterback. If you have him, like you're starting him.
Agreed. And for Tua, someone that I've been saying for weeks to pivot off of, his playoff stretch is absolutely brutal. He's going to go Jets, Ravens, and then Cowboys. That is the toughest quarterback stretch that you're going to see. I do think against the Cowboys, they could put up a lot of points and it could be playable, but the Ravens offense has been great this year. They've been top 5, and the Jets have been the best team against wide receivers, which have been the Dolphins' specialty. So the matchups really are not going to be great for Tua.
From Colo, is Ramondre Stevenson droppable? Somebody like Ty Chandler, same with Jordan Addison or Jalen Reed. Did Madison break his neck or something? I don't get the Chandler love because his last 2 weeks he's combined for 9 points in a PPR league. I don't know when you start Ty Chandler. I don't know when you start Ty Chandler. The offense looks really bad. I don't want to start a running back on a bad offense. And his next few games are Cincinnati, Detroit, Green Bay. Like, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love it. I would not want to drop Ramondre.
I want to keep him just in case.
I mean, I know that everybody got hype about the Zeke comeback. They use Zeke as an outside receiver. They're not going to be using Zeke for 20 carries and 10 targets a game, which was pretty much what it felt like he got on a Thursday night football. I don't think that's the formula. I don't think he's going to have the explosiveness to get past a guy like Chris Jones this week. Zeke played his best fantasy performance in 3 years. I think it's more of a one-off than it is a resurgence in his career.
Addison for Jalen Reed's a bit better because, Addison's last 5 games, 10, 10, 7, 9, 4. Yeah, I could entertain that one. I could agree to that one.
I don't hate it. I mean,
I think it's whoever you believe in.
He's going to be the one, clearly.
That's a whoever you believe in question for me.
But I do think actually, I don't know who drop us your other running backs. You talked about Khalil Herbert. I'd rather drop Khalil Herbert for Jaden Reed.
Might need your running backs. That was also different. That was also a different user, different question.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yep. All right, we'll go off of that now. Still gonna do some waiver wire here. So running backs. These are just I'm reading off a list of fantasy pros. Doesn't mean we have to talk about all of them. Dante Foreman, 32% of leagues. Ty Chandler, 22% of leagues. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 43% of leagues. Rico Dowdle, 9% of leagues. Zamir White, 1.3% of leagues. Jerick McKinnon, 38.8. Based on what Nick just told me, the only one I'm really rushing to get here is Zamir White.
Yeah, I think Zamir is the one that I would target. The other two I really like on the list is Jerick McKinnon. If you're in a full PPR format, he was really good. Last year he was a league winner down the stretch. Had a lot of touchdowns in that span. If Pacheco is going to miss significant time, it has not been ruled that he will. So don't take it as I'm saying that. But he did injure his shoulder, the same one he had surgery on in the offseason. It is possible that they not pivot, but that they rest him. They know that they're going to be in the playoffs. So why rush him back for a guy like McKinnon? And the third guy is Tajay Spears. Derrick Henry will have the easiest playoff schedule, but he did get a little dinged up in this game. Spears has seen a lot of the workload on the field and a lot of the pass catching work. I actually have Spears going in a league this week because my running back position got so thinned out with Ramondre's injury. So I don't love the Spears play, but he's been getting consistent usage and enough where in a matchup against the Texans, where the Titans have historically been phenomenal on the ground and in the air with Derrick Henry, if Tajay Spears steals 20 to 30% of the workload that Derrick Henry gets, he could easily hit like a 10 to 12 point number. So if you need the play and those other guys get hurt, that's your guy.
Wide receivers, Odell Beckham Jr. owned in 46% of leagues. Probably not on your waiver wire. Should not be. We've been saying it for weeks now. Elijah Moore, 44%. Zay Jones, 28%. And I'll give you one more. Noah Brown, 45%. I personally like all of them if you have the roster spot.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nick. All these guys are definitely rosterable, playable, could be flexed at any moment, depending on the matchup.
Tight ends, Logan Thomas, 44% of leagues. Kate Otten, 32% of leagues. Tucker Kraft, I see getting some love, 6% of leagues. any love there. To me, it's just touchdown or bust for all of them.
It's touchdown or bust. And the schedule makers say K-Don has the easiest schedule, or at least Fantasy Pro says it. So we'll go with K-Don at the one.
All right. Moving on to defenses. So for this week, we're looking at the Atlanta Falcons defense. They're facing the Carolina Panthers, the Colts defense, facing the Pittsburgh Steelers, maybe Mitch Trubisky, and the Rams defense facing the Commanders. I'd play any of them. I actually think I'm playing the Dolphins this week against the Jets. I don't know if I'll pivot off of that, but that's who I have right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Atlanta for me is the number one. Green Bay is not on this list because they got picked up in a lot of leagues because of that Giants matchup. If they hit the waiver wire for people, I think they're a good sneaky add down the stretch, especially if you have a bye, because they're going to be at Carolina after your fantasy bye week. So watch out for them on your waivers as well if you're one of those.
Any others rest of playoffs that you've maybe already stashed in leagues?
Colts I have stashed. As for the rest of the list that of the teams that have like the lower percentage, the Rams have been one of the worst defenses in fantasy. The Bears have been one of the worst defenses in fantasy. I think both are in the bottom 10. So regardless of the matchup, they have not been good enough to warrant the roster spot or the start. 14 weeks into fantasy, if you're still ranked the bottom 10, I don't care who the matchup is, unless if it is that Carolina matchup, you're not guaranteed a starting spot in your lineup.
Yep. Alrighty, so that's our waiver wire. Hopefully we helped you out a little bit with that. We're now going to go to our Week 14 recapping every single game for Week 14 with our biggest fantasy takeaways. Again, you guys keep asking questions in the comments. We will prioritize your questions over the show. Thursday night, Patriots at Steelers. Let's spend a minute on this. Big takeaway, Ezekiel Elliott had an awesome game.
Yeah, that's about it. And like Nick and I don't know. I think Nico echoes what I said. I don't think Zeke's resurging his career. I think he had a very good game in the passing game. If you were not in a full PPR format, that touchdown gave him the great week. But his statistics looked like Christian McCaffrey as a less efficient runner. I don't think the Patriots are going to be scoring 20 points a game for the rest of the season. And even if they do, if Ramondre is there, I don't think Zeke is going to take over that workload. May take more snaps and more snap share, maybe, but I don't think against that Kansas City defense, Ezekiel Elliott is going to be a starting play.
Zeke has the Chiefs, Broncos, then Bills if he plays out the rest of your fantasy season. Not ideal.
You don't like those matchups.
Bucks at Falcons. And we're also going to report injuries if we have any, but luckily we haven't had any so far. What's your big fantasy takeaway from this one if you have one?
I mean,
was this game even on the a lot of points were scored in this game, but I don't remember it on the red zone.
Yeah, it definitely had a lot of red zone time. My only takeaway is going to be that Mike Evans had his worst fantasy game of the year. I don't think that's an indictment. I don't think it's going to be an indication for his rest of the season. AJ Terrell is a very, very good NFL corner. He played him very, very well. And the Buccaneers schedule for the playoffs, you're going to be looking at Green Bay, which isn't terribly terrifying. You get Jacksonville, which is not terrifying. And then you get Marshawn Lattimore in the championship, who historically has gotten into Mike Evans' head. We'll see where the Buccaneers are. I imagine that game will probably decide which one of them is going to be competing with the Falcons for that last playoff spot. So there's a lot on the line, a lot of things for Mike Evans to compete for. And Baker Mayfield has no problem slinging the ball down the field. So I am not concerned about the one-off week. I don't think you have anything to worry about. I think it was just a very good matchup from a very good corner.
For the Bucs side of things, Rashad White had a 100-yard game, also had 30 receiving yards and a touchdown. He's been a beast the second half of the season. He's been very good. He's one of the guys I said to go try to trade for. And if he did, probably better off now. Falcons side of things. Nick, what did I tell you about my guy Kyle Pitts on Sunday?
You said you were going up against him, and he'd have a day.
I mean, I think 3 receptions for 57 yards and tutties a day in Kyle Pitts' standards.
Oh, absolutely. By his metrics.
Like a 14-point game for Kyle Pitts. And our guy Drake London also had a day and probably brought some guys to some fantasy playoffs. 10 receptions for 172 yards.
Yep.
So there's that. All right, Detroit Lions at the Bears. The Lions are frauds, and I've been saying it for a couple of weeks now. They're the same old Lions. If the Lions missed the playoffs, I would laugh really hard. And Seattle is the tiebreaker over them, by the way. I would laugh really hard.
Miss. Detroit can't miss. We can't let
Nobody wants to see them miss, but it would be so Lions to lose out.
Listen, would it
and
be
the Packers
Lions?
get in?
Absolutely.
They have the Packers the last
they are
week.
one of the most fun teams in football.
They are.
Having
but they're
said
not that good.
I did say this to Nick, and I will stand by it. We're not going to preview too far down the board. But if a wild card team like Seattle, the Rams, or the Packers meets one of the luckier teams like the Lions in the playoffs in the first round, I don't know how easily they're going to get out of that. I don't like them matching up well with the Rams. I don't like them matching up with the Packers. I don't like them matching up with the Seahawks, frankly. So the Lions are in a lot of trouble if they don't figure stuff out down the stretch. On that offensive side of the ball, do not stress. As I always tell Nick, I feel like players are like limited. Like, this is your ceiling for how many yards and touchdowns you can get. Be grateful it happened in week 13, the bad game, unless if you lost your playoff spot because of this. For guys like Amon-Ra and I know Gibbs found the end zone, but like Monty and some of your other threats like Laporta, be grateful it happened this week and not next week.
Yeah. So the Lions are 9-4 right now, and the next 4 are Denver, Minnesota, the Cowboys, and Minnesota. I see like one win there. So I do think they're going to make the playoffs, but how funny would it be if they missed?
How do you see one win?
I think they'll split with Minnesota, lose to Denver, and lose to the Cowboys. I see one win.
They're the favorites against Denver. I don't think that Minnesota with Nick Mullins, who was announced as the starter, is going to be much of a threat personally.
So 2-2. I think Denver beats them, and I think the Cowboys beat them.
Okay. I hope that.
From a fantasy perspective, DJ Moore is still really good. Justin Fields had a decent-ish. Yeah, he had a pretty good game. I mean, throwing touchdown, 58 rushing yards and a tutty. Yeah, Fields had a pretty good game. I wish I had the stat on Twitter. It's not a fantasy stat, but it's a field stat. But Fields has actually been really good this year. Like when he's been healthy and when the offense has been healthy. The Bears, from a football standpoint, not a fantasy standpoint, but it will affect fantasy, are in a really interesting predicament because they're going to have to choose between Fields and Caleb Williams. And I'm intrigued to see where they go because I could see a reason for both.
I totally agree with that. I agree with that. I think it was very cut and dry. They were going to trade away Fields. I don't think he's earned another year because he has played very well when he's been healthy. But he's earned the question of him or Caleb Williams. I still lean Caleb Williams. And I do think him as an Atlanta Falcon is going to be really fun next year. But he definitely earned a lot more respect this year than he did coming into the year with expectations.
I think here's why I lean Caleb Williams. They won't have to pay their quarterback for another 3 or 4 years. Yep. And then they could trade Justin Fields for draft. The Bears have their own draft pick. So they could trade Justin Fields for more draft picks and draft an offensive lineman or something. I think that's the only reason I would lean Caleb Williams. And I do kind of feel bad for Fields because respectfully, they really should roll with what they have and trade that Caleb Williams pick for a boatload of picks, use their pick that'll be low and build around Justin Fields, who's kind of earned his spot. I think if Justin Fields would be in year 2, I would say roll with Justin Fields, but now he's in year 3. So his contract's, they'll pick up their 5th-year option on him after next season, but like they're gonna have to pay him. So I do kind of feel for the guy because I don't think he's the problem, but the Bears are in such a monumentally like ridiculous position where they have a chance to turn their franchise around, and then they're gonna have to make a tough choice.
Agreed with that totally.
Let's move on. Colts at the Bengals. The Bengals demolished the playoff leading kind of Colts, and Zach Moss was bad again. So I don't think he's a league winner.
Correct. I agree with you on that front.
And Jonathan Taylor could be back, I think, this week or next week too.
Yes, it was expected 1 to 2 weeks. He could be back this week, which would obviously inspire so much life into your fantasy team. I want to talk about the Bengals, and I want to talk about Walmart. Walmart Joe Burrow. And I don't even know if I want to call him Walmart Joe Burrow because he doesn't look like a discounted Joe Burrow. He just looks like Joe Burrow. And I don't want to rag on Joe Burrow because obviously he's injured and he looked good for one season of football. Has not been able to stay healthy since. But my point is, this
2
offense is
seasons
so
of
loaded.
football.
There are so many weapons on this offense. There are think about this for fantasy football, to bring it to a fantasy football perspective. For flex position players, Joe Burrow had 3 guys drafted within the first 4 rounds of your fantasy draft. Joe Mixon being the latest, and Joe Mixon's the top 5 or 6 running back on the season in full PPR formats. That offense is absolutely loaded with skill position players. And when you plug in a quarterback that is capable of completing passes, getting the ball downfield to your weapons, you can win games. And when Joe Burrow was healthy, he was putting the same stat lines that Jake Browning was putting up, which to me is an indictment on him. For your fantasy team, it just proves the same point. Yes, do we want to knock down Jamar Chase a little bit because it's not Joe Burrow? Absolutely. I'm not arguing Jake Browning's a better quarterback than Joe Burrow. I'm arguing Zach Taylor's a good coach. This is a very good team. It's a very good offensive system. And when you have a capable backup quarterback, you can compete. And the Bengals right now are tied for the 6th and 7th seed in the AFC. They have a lot to play for, and they're going to continue to play well. And those superstar players, especially Joe Mixon and Chase Brown, we didn't talk about him on the waiver wire segment enough. He has looked very, very talented on that team. The 2 of them are going to be very fantasy relevant down the stretch. Joe Mixon could very much be a league winner after that Burrow injury.
You were all over Joe Mixon. You were all over Mixon. And I think, and this is not a fantasy take here, but I think that Zach Taylor is getting a lot of flowers right now, and I think he should, whether they make the playoffs or not. Sure. And Jake Browning might be like solidifying himself as like a journeyman backup, maybe even a starter somewhere. I don't think so, but Michael Pittman was also awesome. 8 for 95 again. And Josh Downs went 3 for 32. So let's stay away from the Josh Downs questions because I'm just not seeing it, man.
Feeling it.
I feel like every single week I'm like, no. Okay. Jacksonville Jaguars and Nick's favorite team, those Cleveland Brownies. Nick, how's it going to feel when the Browns clinch a playoff spot by beating your Jets?
It's going to feel great. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Jets are still going to beat the Browns.
Okay. That's your Super Bowl, by the way. That is your. I mean, you had 2 Super Bowls.
No, my Super Bowl. No, I said after the Week 1 injury to Aaron Rodgers that the Jets and the Broncos was the Super Bowl, as you dubbed the Baby Bowl.
So this is your Pro Bowl.
This is my Pro Bowl. It's a game that I'd like to win, but who really cares? It doesn't really mean much at all. For your Browns, they've looked phenomenal. Joe Flacco.
Stefanski's another one that needs to get his flowers too.
Oh yeah. I think there's a lot of very good offensive young coaches in football. And we don't need to get into a full-on football debate. The aged coaches, that they're going to get filtered out over the next few years. When these offensive young coaches are taking guys like Jake Browning and Joe Flacco and making them look like Joe Burrow. They're making them look like prime NFL young superstar talented quarterbacks. And the Browns offense is not fantastic. They're not an unstoppable force. There you have a backup running back in Jerome Ford, a guy in Kareem Hunt who was sitting on the waiver wires waiting to be signed as a backup job.
2 backup tackles.
Elijah Moore, who was worth a 3rd-round draft pick, and Amari Cooper, who has been the model for inconsistency this year. And they went up against Jackson. They hosted Jacksonville, a very, very competitive team. And start to finish, they outplayed them. And I know that there's a little bit of Trevor Lawrence had this ankle injury. When you're out on that field, you say you could be out on that field, you got to be 100%. And I don't think he didn't look 100%. I thought you saw a lack of mobility, but you saw him pass very well from the pocket. This Cleveland Browns defense is for real. They are legit, and they outplay them the entire course of the game. For your fantasy team, if they roll with Joe Flacco the rest of the year, and I don't think that there's a reason right now that they won't, Elijah Moore could be a league winner, and we talked about him on the waiver wire segment. He's been getting a lot of love and a lot of targets from this guy, and down the stretch, I don't like them against the Jets. I don't think they're going to match up well against the Jets, but Elijah Moore's got a revenge game. Could be very interesting, could be a sneaky waiver wire ad for your team.
Calvin Ridley sneakily the wide receiver 25. Even though I think he's been a bust, maybe I'm just like not taking my goggles off here. I don't know, but I think this offense kind of rolled through like guys like Etienne and Christian Kirk. Etienne didn't have a good game. Christian Kirk's gone. Evan Ingram actually filled the Christian Kirk role, 11 receptions for 95 yards and 2 tutties. I'm not sure. I think Evan Ingram's a lot more fantasy relevant now that Christian Kirk's out, but I don't think they have a number one over there that's really going to step up, because I haven't seen Ridley do it in the 2 games that Christian Kirk is out. In the 2 games that Kirk got injured last week, but in the 2 games, including the injured game, Calvin Ridley had 7 and 9. So
Yep.
he hasn't stepped up. Next game, we have the Carolina Panthers at the New Orleans Saints. I played the Saints defense. Nick, I don't think the Panthers are where you kind of thought they were.
No, I thought they had a shot to upset them. I'll be honest. I'll take it on the chin, but I did still play the New Orleans defense. So
you did tell me you were playing. I'm not going to fault you on that take. I just think the Panthers really are that bad.
No, yeah, I think that Bryce Young looks like the biggest number 1 overall draft pick bust. And I feel
bad for him.
The roster's not great, but my God, he is not making it any better. I mean,
no,
his size was a concern going into the draft. It is still a concern. He is throwing it off his offensive line. Passes are getting deflected. He's dropping back into the pocket. The offensive line's not great, so they're getting around the offensive tackles. Like, it is a tire fire over there, and Carolina's got a lot to figure out. The only thing I figured out is there is not a single player on the Carolina Panthers that I want to play from offense to defense. Adam Thielen's been inconsistent. He had a great start to the year, went down. 74 yards in this game is pretty solid, but he has not been consistent enough for a start in your fantasy playoffs, frankly.
Yep.
And I don't know how you want a piece of this offense this year. Next year, they're going to have to figure something out because they're going to have to retool this entire thing and pretty much start from ground zero, rebuild. But yeah, man, this is brutal. This is awful. Just, again, play your defenses against them for the playoffs, because that's the only good thing coming out of that city.
I don't know much to say about the Saints. Alvin Kamara had negative 11 receiving yards. That's such an outlier and so interesting and doesn't happen often. But the Saints are not a fantasy-friendly team. I love Olave's talent. Don't love Derek Carr, quarterback. Please get Jameis. Do I have Olave on any of my teams in the playoffs? I don't think so. I think the 3 teams I got bounced with are the 3 I have Olave on. For the love of God, put Jameis in there, please. All right, Texans at the Jets. Your Jets got a big win, man. They stopped the unstoppable force that is C.J. Stroud, and nobody really had a good game here for Houston. I know you had said to sit those receivers. I think it was really tough to sit a guy like Nico Collins, but if you did, he only had like 1.3 points. Noah Brown was non-existent. He had a goose egg. Devin Singletary had a touchdown and 60 yards, so I guess he had like an 11-point game. Sure. Garrett Wilson had an awesome game and seems to be the only. Well, Breece Hall had a really good game.
Breece Hall's receiving game was crazy.
Yeah, I just looked at his rushing numbers and they weren't good. But yeah, so I guess Breece and Garrett Wilson were your guys, and I don't know. They finally found a way to just like check down to him like they do to McCaffrey. Like, it only took you 2 years almost. Yeah. Keep doing that, and Breece Hall is going to have a very successful back half of the season.
I totally agree with that. We talked about waiver wire quarterbacks. Zach Wilson is not one of them. But I do think they have a favorable matchup coming up soon. And if Zach can put together another game like this, maybe.
Respectfully, you preached this one last year to the heavens, and Zach Wilson was the playoff savior quarterback for fantasy, and he may have averaged 12 fantasy points. My other gripe with that is I think there's been too much inconsistency from the quarterback position as a New York Jet this year to trust it in a win or go home fantasy football playoff matchup. I'm comfortable with letting Zach Wilson drop 40 on the waiver wire than taking the chance on him. Nothing against him. I think if maybe he started the entire year, maybe I'd feel differently. But the fact that they benched him and then there were the reporting he didn't want to play, and there's too much for me to trust my fantasy team on it.
That's valid. That's valid. I can understand that. My only thing I will say on the Jets is the defense is legit. They're going up against Miami this week. I've warned everybody about Tua for weeks against this team. Tyreek Hill, now a little dinged up, going up against this defense. I think he'll be fine because he got out there after he got hurt and still tried to play. Got a couple big catches.
Trouble.
But I would not be surprised if you watched a lot of Dolphins ruin a lot of your fantasy playoffs this week. and it sucks to say as a Tyreek Hill owner. It sucks to say as a Tua owner. It sucks to say as a Waddle owner and a Mostert owner. But listen, the Jets defense is very legit. The Texans offense have been absolutely rolling teams. And as Salah said earlier this year, they've been embarrassing quarterbacks. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and add CJ Stroud to the list. That Jets defense is legit, and they got a couple other matchups coming up. You don't want to play them against the Dolphins, but they're going to get Washington, and they're going to get then they have the Browns in championship week. That Jets defense, they should not be on your waiver wire. People might drop them with this Dolphins matchup coming up. I mean, they're a must start. They're a must start for week 16 and 17. No questions asked.
Football take, the Dolphins are in trouble. Jets, Cowboys, Ravens, Bills. The Bills are winning that division.
I don't know if they'll win it.
I think the Bills are winning that division.
I love the Bills. I think the Bills, I could be wrong. I think they have San Fran or
the Bills. The Bills are 2 games behind. They have the Cowboys, Chargers, Patriots, and Dolphins. Even if they drop that game to the Cowboys, the Bills win 3. The Dolphins, I mean, they'll pick up 1 on the Dolphins by beating them. They just need the Dolphins to win to lose 1 more game.
Okay. I mean, listen, and they could be that game. They got it.
But if they're tied, the Dolphins may have a better division record than the Bills. The Bills have lost to the Jets and the
Bills beat them. The Bills beat them earlier this year, so they'll have the head-to-head.
Oh, they would have the double head-to-head.
The Buffalo will have to keep them.
Good call. I think the Bills might win out. I'm not sold on your cow. This is my big Cowboy game with you. I want to see where the Cowboys are this week because the Bills are hot. They're hosting the Cowboys. I'm very intrigued.
Nick, there have been 2 teams I've been very high on since halfway through the year. It's been Buffalo and it has been Dallas.
You have.
It's a win-win for me.
It is. I'm very intrigued. I'm very intrigued.
Yes, I agree with that.
I think the Bills can win out. I think they can. Anyway, no more football take for now. I forgot to mention this injury as well. CJ Stroud went out with a concussion. He's still in concussion protocol as of Tuesday. Nico Collins also was ruled out with a calf injury. So watch that stuff throughout the week. Yeah. All right. Rams at the Ravens. I really, really, really needed the Rams to win this game, and I would have won my survivor pool. The other guy had the Ravens. Okay. Fantasy takeaway. Go.
The Ravens are pretty good, and the Rams are much better than people expected. Cooper Kupp finally bounced back. Kyren Williams, again, another 100-yard game. Phenomenal week. The 2 of them, rest of the season, if they can keep that momentum, and this was against a top 3 defense across the entire season, are going to have no problem steamrolling. And the Baltimore has historically been a great team against the NFC, especially with Lamar Jackson. I think he only has 2 or 3 losses in his career against the NFC. He typically blows teams out. It's very hard to game plan for a guy like Lamar. But this team had no problem cooking them. And you got your Odell Beckham revenge game. A lot of things had to click for the Ravens to play very well, like a likely 54-yard touchdown. How likely is that to happen again? Probably not. So your Rams, they're a legit team. That defense is not legit. It's very susceptible. But those offensive pieces, man, those game scripts are always going to be good. There's always going to be high scoring. Sean McVay knows how to get the ball down the field with Kyren Williams and Matthew Stafford. So kudos to them. Just play your Rams. We get a lot of Puka Nacua questions on Sunday. Like, stop the questions, man.
I think he's earned a roster spot.
He's earned it.
From Noah Caldwell, pick 2. Breece Hall, Ezekiel Elliott, Najee, or Keaton Mitchell. My fancy take on the Ravens is that I don't want to play any running back. Lamar's running back 1, and then he's throwing the ball. I don't want to play any Ravens running back. And if I have to, it's J.K. Dobbins. It's Gus Edwards, knowing that he's going to get a lot of the red zone looks.
I kind of agree with that. I think for this week, I think Breece is a lock every week. And then for this week alone, you have Zeke against the Patriots. You have Najee against the Colts. Zeke against who? What does Zeke have?
I said Patriots. I meant Chiefs.
Yeah, no, we don't want that.
I'll go Najee.
Yeah, you got to go with Najee. You go with Najee on that.
And then he says, if Keenan Allen can't go this week, rank George Pickens, Yuck, Jordan Addison, and Brandon Cooks. I think I'll say Brandon Cooks only because that game could be really high scoring against Buffalo.
Yeah, listen, Dak's playing for an MVP. Brandon Cooks has been clicking on all cylinders for the last few weeks. I want to pull up his stats real quick because the dude has been very underrated and is finishing with a very good season. Since the bye week, I mean, the week before the bye week, he's gone 15-14, bad game at 1.7, 33, 8, 17, 16, and then a bad week this week. I mean, he's had a lot more booms than a lot more busts. He's been very, very good. He's got the very high ceiling. We talked about Addison earlier. Last 5 games have not been very good with the changing quarterback. We don't like him. And George Pickens, that inconsistency on that offense has been legit, and the Colts defense has been pretty legit this year. So I don't want to roll a guy like George Pickens out. I know you might have trusted him for a lot of the year. If he's your guy, sure, go with him. But for me, Brandon Cooks clearly has shown the most explosiveness on the best offense on this list.
All right. Not going to spend a ton of time on this game. A 3-0 game, the Vikings and the Raiders. Alexander Madison came out of it with a sprained ankle. Justin Jefferson had a chest injury. He was released from the hospital. So just watch those injuries. And Josh Jacobs sustained a knee injury. He did not return either. So watch those injuries. Nick, I don't have a fantasy takeaway. Both these quarterbacks are terrible. Both these teams are terrible. We're a little bit pressed for time. Have to get here by 6:30. I mean, I'm still playing my guys, but your guys are dwindling as to who you could play from these teams.
Correct.
All right. Seahawks at the 49ers. Geno Smith did not play. Drew Lock played, and he did not look bad. No other injuries from this one. Do you have a fantasy takeaway besides play every single one of your 49ers every week?
Yeah, pretty much that. The only one that I would want to harp on is Brock Purdy is the QB5, and there are only 5 quarterbacks I'd rather play rest of the season than him. But we'll address that more on Sunday.
Sure. For the Seahawks, I think DK Metcalf's still in your lineup every week, but the rest of them, I think it's kind of matchup dependent. But this week against Philly, you seem to think we could play them against Philly, but
yep, that hothead DK.
Listen, this week was not on him. He got pushed in the neck. And I don't know if you know this because I didn't know this. He had a broken neck in college. So that was not cool that Fred Warner pushed his neck from behind. He did have a hothead reaction after that, but if my neck was broken.
Did you see the report from Shanahan on that? Like what?
Yeah. The
Christmas present?
Sure.
That's crazy.
All right. Bills and Chiefs, very entertaining game. Bills are a wagon. What's your fantasy takeaway from this one?
L'Jarius Sneed is a shutdown corner in this league, and he's not getting enough love. He's been shutting down wide receiver ones for weeks, and Stephon Diggs off a bye shut down is something that you really don't hear often. I'm not worried about Diggs bouncing back. I have no question about that. But my God, I mean, that was a fun game on the Buffalo side. Very well-deserved, well-earned win. Definitely no controversial penalties down the stretch.
Sure.
So we're gonna roll with it. We're gonna roll with Buffalo the rest of the year.
Yeah, nothing controversial. Not like a tug on a jersey during the Super Bowl. Like nothing controversial.
No one off sides on defense or offense.
No sides or no like roughing the passer in an AFC Championship game to get them to a Super Bowl where maybe a certain team got a flag in that Super Bowl as well. Just saying. I'm just saying. Fantasy takeaway, Rashee Rice, 7 receptions, 72 yards, and a touchdown. I think he's kind of earned a spot in your lineups, depending on your leagues.
Yep.
He's been pretty good. Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. This is why I don't like this doc that we do use sometimes. Oh, no, it's there. I'm sorry. I glanced over Herbert's name. So Justin Herbert, fractured index finger. I think he's having surgery on it or something, but he is officially out for the season. And I do joke about him on the show with my pal Nick, but I do feel bad for Herbert in this situation. Really good fantasy player, is a good quarterback, and we're going to miss him down the stretch for sure.
I think that this is a real learning opportunity for Nick. So I'm going to take the positive out of the Justin Herbert injury. For the next 4 weeks, and you saw it in this game, you're going to watch how pitiful the Los Angeles Chargers are. And you will realize that Justin Herbert is the only reason that they got any wins with this pitiful team.
Well, maybe they should trade for Jake Browning.
They would be phenomenal. Would be a phenomenal backup.
Do you have any other fantasy takeaways? Like Quentin Johnston, maybe he's kind of doing well.
No.
3 receptions, 91 yards. Maybe.
Nope.
Cortland Sutton had another touchdown. Javonte Williams had a touchdown. They were pretty good. What do we got? We got like 4 minutes left. All right, guys. We do have to
fire it quick.
We got to fire it a little bit quick. This is the last question we could answer. From George. Hey guys, for a playoff matchup, Fields or Tua this week? I think I would go Fields. I'm playing Fields over Stroud in a league.
It's a very tough one with Fields against Cleveland. I think that he's mobile enough to be good enough where we've already watched Tua play this year against the Jets and have a bad game. My only concern would be that the way you game plan for Fields is the same way you game plan for Lamar, and Lamar's not great against the Browns. But the rushing upside and that offense, I think, is just going to be a little bit better in this matchup.
All right. Cowboys and Eagles. Fantasy takeaway from this one.
Man, I wish we had more time because I've been saying for 3 weeks now that the Eagles are frauds. Well, I've been saying it for 5 weeks, but
I'll give Nick his flowers. Nick's been on this train that Dallas is going to beat the Eagles. Nick has been on this train.
I've been on the train that the Eagles were going to be the 5 seed by this week, and the Eagles are the 5 seed in this week. So even though technically if both went out, then the Eagles would get the rub or the tiebreaker. But anyways, listen, Dak's your MVP. He's shown he's your MVP. This offense clicks on all cylinders because of him. Mike McCarthy, to me, I've said it for 3 years now. No one's bought me on it up until now. Mike McCarthy is the most underrated coach in the NFL at the moment. He gets way too much hate, and he's proven as a Super Bowl winning head coach and as one of those guys that just gets that offense consistently winning. This is going to be the 3rd year in a row that Dallas wins 12 games under him. Not a lot of coaches do that, and not a lot of coaches do it often. So don't want to harp on it for too long, but those Philadelphia Eagles are frauds.
Not frauds. We'll talk about that another time. Just not a top 3 team in the league, and that's okay. Not everybody can be top 3. Jake Ferguson, league winner, 5 for 72. I mean, since the bye here, we're looking at 14, 22, 12, 6, 4, 19, and 12. Like, you have the stinkers in there. It's fine. Not worried about it. Ferguson's been awesome. Last 2 games, the Monday Nighters, Packers at Giants. Once about frauds, those Packers are not that good and should not be a playoff team. Aaron Jones has a knee, did not play. Christian Watson was out with a hamstring. Hopefully those 2 guys will be back next week for your team. I don't have a fantasy takeaway besides that. Besides Jalen Reed had a pretty good game. I think he had 20 points.
Yeah, Jaden Reed's been really good. He's going to be pretty much a lock with how many injuries have been happening for your fantasy lineup for your playoffs.
And lastly, Titans at the Dolphins. Titans stunned them, and Tyreek Hill got hurt. I think it was an ankle. I think he'll be good for the Jets game, but that is something to definitely watch. He did come back and play through it. Mostert had 96 yards, 2 tutties. Devon Achane had 47 yards. Jalen Waddle finished with a team-high 79 reception yards, no tutties, and Tyreek Hill held 4 receptions, 61 yards. And the other side of things, DeAndre Hopkins had an awesome game, 7 for 124 and a tutty. Tajay Spears, 6 receptions for 89 yards. The run game really wasn't there, but Derrick Henry did have 2 rushing touchdowns. If you have a fancy takeaway, you could fire away. But I see a couple outliers in this game. The only thing my only other takeaway is that the Dolphins have a really tough stretch. And I think you could see a situation, if you remember a couple of years ago when I lost in round 2, because I played Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf against the Rams. Tyreek's more talented for sure. I'm not saying bench Tyreek, but I think you could get into a situation where you play your Dolphins and they cost you.
I will leave it on this. It's the take I've said for 4 weeks now, and it's kind of proving to be true. Tua is going to lose somebody the fantasy playoffs. Be prepared to pivot. I don't care if you've started them for 14 weeks. The winners of your fantasy championship know when to pivot. This week, this week, and championship week are pivot off of Tua weeks.
Okay, there you go. Alrighty, guys. Thank you for watching us. Thank you for supporting. I'm going to cut the plug short because I do have to get going. Next time you hear from us this Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to join us on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, 9 a.m. for our fantasy preview for the first round of your fantasy playoffs. We want to answer your questions. We want to help you guys out. We want to help you win your leagues. Join us then. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for joining. Thank you for supporting. And we'll talk to you guys Sunday, 9 a.m.